13 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few running backs. We start this week. The first guy, Alexander Madison of the Minnesota Vikings. So Madison, the next 2 weeks here, he's going to be very fantasy relevant, and he's got a great matchup at the Detroit Lions. They give up the fifth most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So the few games he's filled in for Dalvin Cook. Some big ball games for Madison. It's been week 3 versus Seattle. 26 carries, 112 rushing yards, 6 catches, 59 yards in that one. Week 5 versus Detroit, 25 carries, 113 yards, 7 catches, 40 yards, a touchdown, and a fumble loss. And then last week versus San Francisco, 7 carries, 21 rush yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 7 yards towards the end of the game where Cook separated the shoulder and torn his labrum. But it's surprising to me that Cook's not out for the season with major injuries like that to his left shoulder. But right here, Madison's going to carry the workload in week 13 and week 14. And I think this ball game at Detroit, he goes over 100 yards total and finds the end zone. He's definitely a running back. That's a must start this week. The second running back is Cordell Patterson of the Atlanta Falcons. So Cordell Patterson, what a season it's been for him. And he's probably been one of the best pickups in all of fantasy football this year. Mike Davis has been a non-factor. And Cordell Patterson, he just puts up points for the most part in the few games where he's got major workload. Week 9 in New Orleans, 9 carries, 10 yards, 6 catches, 126 yards. Week 10 at Dallas, that ball game was a blowout and he was banged up. So they sat him out the rest of the way. 4 carries, 25 yards, a catch, 14 yards. Week 11 versus the Patriots, he was out with the injury. And then week 12 at Jacksonville, a huge ball game. 16 carries, 108 rush yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. And he added 2 catches for 27 yards. So obviously Patterson qualifies at wide receiver and running back in fantasy leagues. And this week here versus the Tampa Bay Bucks, I think this is the only chance for the Falcons to at least keep this ball game a little competitive here. Is Cordell Patterson getting a lot of carries out of the backfield and catching a decent amount of passes out of the backfield as well. So this week here, I could see a lot of garbage time for Patterson, a lot of receptions, and I could see him score anywhere from 15 to 20 fantasy points. And he's a running back I would start this week. The next running back is Antonio Gibson of the Washington football team. So Gibson here, we know he's been dealing with a shin injury this season. And right here, he had a monster workload on Monday Night Football versus the Seahawks. 29 carries, and he also caught 7 balls. So 36 touches in that one for him. 29 carries, 111 yards, 7 catches, 35 yards, and a 2-point conversion. So a big PPR day, no doubt about it. It was for Gibson. And he's got another great matchup here, week 13 at the Raiders, that give up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So Gibson here, to have a pretty huge workload like that, 36 touches in that ball game, claims to me that he's pretty healthy and he's good to go here. So this week 13 in Vegas, Washington, they're riding high now, winning 3 ball games in a row here. And it's been about running the football a lot and playing tight defense. So this week, I think we see another big workload here for Antonio Gibson. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him get over 100 total yards in this one and find the end zone. So he's definitely a running back. I would start the next running back. I would start Myles Gaskin of the Miami Dolphins. I was down on Gaskin for most of the season, but the last few weeks here, he's played pretty good football here for fantasy owners, and the Dolphins who have won 4 in a row now. So the last few games for Gaskin, week 10 versus Baltimore, 14 carries, 31 yards, a catch for 14 yards. Week 11 at the Jets, 23 carries, 89 yards, 3 catches, 7 yards, and a touchdown. Week 12 versus the Panthers, another solid ball game, 16 carries, 49 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 catches, 3 yards. So week 13, a great matchup for Gaskin here versus the New York Giants that give up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So Gaskin here, I think he could get 70, 80 total yards in this ball game and find the end zone. It's a good matchup. Miami's playing well. And this ball game versus the Giants, I could see a grinded out run and defensive type of ball game. So Gaskin this week, I think, finds double digits. Once again, final running back I would start this week, C.Y. Mitchell of the San Francisco 49ers. So the game's here for Mitchell. He's been a solid number 2 running back for fantasy owners. And we've seen some huge games along the lines as well this season. Week 9 versus the Cardinals, 8 carries, 36 yards, 5 catches, 43 yards. Week 10 versus the Rams, a huge workload, 27 carries, 91 yards. Week 11 at Jacksonville, he was out with the injury. But week 12, he came back with a vengeance versus the Vikings. 27 carries, 133 rush yards, a touchdown, and he added 5 catches for 35 yards. So right here, he's the bell cow, no doubt about it, number one running back over there in San Francisco. We didn't see Wilson or Hasty get much work in that last game. And right here in Week 13, he's got a slam dunk matchup at the Seahawks that give up the second most fantasy points to running backs on the season. And like I mentioned early in the video, we just saw Gibson come off a huge game versus Seattle. And I think Mitchell has a great one as well. So that's a few running backs I would start here for Week 13 of the fantasy football season.